Welcome back to the Iron Sights Podcast After Dark. I'm with new friend, Chris Haugh. Welcome to the show, dude.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm stoked to have you down here. I'll keep this really brief, and then we'll just kind of jump right into your story. You are a law enforcement officer. I have an affinity for canine officers. I just in my recent journey in life, I've become more acquainted with more of those. And you are a canine officer currently active. That is maybe a little bit a part of this story. I think it definitely ties in. Just so happened we got to get connected through a good friend of ours who we train with regularly and put us in touch. So welcome to the show, man. Thanks for taking time on your day off to come down and chat.
Hey, thank you for having me, and thank you for being willing to share our side and be really objective and be able to kind of personalize the human that's behind the badge for our job.
Yeah, I'm honored when people agree to do that, because I understand there's trust that comes in with that, and making sure that it's fair and it's a fair platform to do that, particularly in today's day and age. I'm doing my best. I'm learning. I never imagined I'd be here. If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have never imagined I'd been in this situation. So I feel honored, and I'm humbled by it. And at times I get a little nervous. I mean, some people will be like, really? You're getting nervous? You sound so controlled and whatever. No, I genuinely want to do a good job and make sure that it's represented well in the best way I can. And I'm not a skilled journalist, right? I'm just a dude who's trying to make a connection between the community and the larger community as a whole, because I have friends inside the community. I think it's very misunderstood a lot of times. And that's not what this is about. It's all the time. It's not about, well, you guys just don't understand us, so we have to talk about this in this particular way. It's more like we want you to understand differently than way you may currently understand it, and you might not necessarily have the inputs that you're getting from certain levels in order to get that understanding. So this is just our way of doing it. So, dude, I'll stop talking. I'd love to hear a little bit more about you, kind of your background, who you are, where you came from, and catch us up.
Yeah, absolutely. I was born and raised in Fremont, grew up there my whole life, have family, have friends still there. Mm-hmm. It's my hometown.
Okay.
After high school, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. Yesterday, 9/11 anniversary came around. Right. That was a huge influencing factor in my life. It really affected me and my family. My mom was in Washington, D.C. On 9/11. She had to drive home for 6 days with a coworker to get back here. So it was a big thing that really caused change in my life, that I wanted to be out there to help people. I wanted to serve in some way. And as time went on, after high school, I worked in construction, and I thought about, maybe I'll be a fireman. I always thought that was the coolest job.
Yeah, they always say that, right? I was like, who doesn't love a fireman?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, looking back, my next life, you're try that fire gig. Right? But
so to be clear, though, the 9/11 thing happened while you were still in high school.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So you're a young man, formidable years.
Yep.
Guy trying to figure it out. Yeah, okay, got it.
So I wanted to serve people in any way that I could. So my best friend growing up was a police explorer, and then he ended up getting a civilian job at the police department. And that was just kind of a cool couple hour a week job. And he said, hey, do you want to apply for this? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Seems like it'd be something fun.
Okay.
And that really evolved into me getting immersed into it. I was going on ride-alongs with officers as often as I could, sometimes a couple times a week. And I really fell in love with it. It really became my passion and my calling. And at the age of 22, which I don't know why they would hire me, but at 22 years old, they hired me, they gave me a badge and a gun, and they said, go out and conquer.
Right. So, okay. So that evolution is actually not uncommon. I've heard that. A lot of guys get into, so I had a firefighter near Pernay who, same thing, went through the Explorer program with the firefighters, and ultimately kind of expanded into that as he got older. And so I don't think a lot of people are familiar with that. This journey often starts like very young age for people, and you didn't come from a family of law enforcement. I didn't get that. So this was just, again, a very impacting time in a lot of people's lives. I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing 9/11. And so it takes you down this path. And okay, so as you're an explorer, can you maybe explain this a little bit to people that may not be familiar with this program? What do police explorers do?
So I was never an explorer. My best friend was, and I feel bad now because I made fun of him the whole time.
So it's like Boy Scouts to an extent, in terms of like there can be a negative stigma attached to it. Right?
There can.
Yeah, okay.
But no, they used to do some really cool stuff, and they still do. A little bit less than before, but they made them learn radio codes and radio etiquette, how to talk on the radio. They gave them uniforms. They taught them how to present yourself, how to dress appropriately. Mm-hmm. They had to learn various community topics, functions. They basically were out volunteering their time, mm-hmm. doing traffic control, helping with the elderly, all these kinds of things. And it's a great segue, from the time that you're in high school to college to the time that you go to the academy, right? You've already kind of been immersed in that culture and in that life. Mm-hmm. And they've taught you a lot of things that have prepared you.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's part of the journey for more people than probably maybe a lot of people in the civilian world or non-LEO world might know. But what you were getting was sort of the cool stories and watching your friend go through all this while you were swinging hammers or whatever you were doing in the construction business. Is that what I heard you say?
Yep.
All right. So 22, you're a young man. Right. So you're a young man. And so you go into the academy. Were there any big surprises? Like when you got in, like this looked cool from the outside, but I didn't really realize this is what this was going to be like. Or, and I'm talking about academy before you're even on the street.
I don't think there were any big surprises in the academy. I think a lot of people helped me and prepared me and got me ready for that environment. So the academy really wasn't that bad. It's a very controlled, safe environment. You can make your mistakes and those kinds of things. So the academy wasn't bad, but that transition out onto the street into training at 22, no life experience really to speak of.
That's where I was going to go with this, right? Because as you're 22, almost 23 years old, and now you're on the street, whether you're in an FTO program or not. I think the whole life experience thing is the big gap, right?
Totally.
You can't get the cop experience, if you will, or being an officer experience without being an officer for a long time. But the stuff that you run into out there and the people that you run into out there, life prepares you for these kinds of conversations and whatever else. Was there anything in that first year that really you were like, oh shit, I'm only 23 years old or 22 years old and I'm doing this?
I got to say, it was the everyday stuff.
Like,
you send me to a domestic violence call, and at 22 years old, I'm giving somebody marriage advice, right? I'm giving somebody advice on parenting their kids.
Yeah, that's a lot to ask, man.
What do I know about any of that at 22? But at the same time, I did the best that I could, and I tried to learn and stay humble. And life taught me as we went along, right? I had to learn about those things in my personal life. I had to learn about these things through dealing with those incidents at work. And eventually you get that experience and you start to feel comfortable in your own skin.
So let me ask you about that. Actually, it's never really come up for me. Like, what business does a police officer have giving, and I'm asking this in quotes, like what business does a cop have giving a married couple that's having marital problems that's now turned into a call to the police, a call for help? What business do you have giving them marital advice or advice on how to raise their kids? When did that become the job of the police department? When
did the public expect us to wear 100 different hats, and one of those being marriage counselor and therapist and all this stuff? I couldn't tell you. I could tell you that I don't offer my own personal advice to people that don't want to hear it. Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. That's not my place. I'm there to do a job. But there are people that genuinely are at a loss. They're at a point where they just don't know what to do. They don't know where to turn to for help. They don't know where to look. And those are the people that will ask you and that want your opinion and want your help. And I didn't get into this job to just slough people off. You
said it, you wanted a service. Yeah,
I want to serve. I want to help. And any way that I can help people, I want to do that. And I want to feel good that the advice that I gave them is the advice that I would give my family. So
yeah, I guess that's what I was asking, just sort of there's a bit of sarcasm and facetiousness in asking the question, because I know that is a large part of the job. You're showing up to these calls where it's people behaving badly, right? And not knowing how to handle the social dynamic of whatever situation they're in. Something gets said, maybe it doesn't get physical, like you hope it doesn't, but somebody's felt they need to break out of this situation that they're in, whatever it is, the argument, the altercation, whatever. And so the 911, we call 911. And then you guys are the ones that show up. It's not a marriage counselor that shows up. It's not a psychologist, psychiatrist, somebody in the mental health or relationship health piece. It's you guys. And so you're faced with these things. That's a lot. I guess I never really actually thought about it that way, and that if this person just had a few more skills in their belt, we wouldn't be here right now, number one. And maybe the relationship would be better, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I guess I never really looked at it like that. At any point, did that make you, having to deal with that stuff on the day-to-day and kind of learning those things along the way, at any point did you kind of get, this is dumb, like what? I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want to have these conversations anymore and kind of switch off.
Yeah, I mean, the cool factor of being a cop and doing our job eventually kind of wears off, right? And those calls start to become mundane, and you can start to get cynical. You can start to lose compassion for people, and it really does affect how you interact with them. And it doesn't mean that you don't care on the inside, but this is just another call that you're answering, right? I mean, and who knows what you answered beforehand? Who knows how your week's been? Sometimes you just want to get in and get out because you got a million other things on your plate. You got a ton of other calls holding. And so, yeah, sometimes it can be hard to show that compassion to those people.
Yeah, I guess if I'm standing on the other end of that, like, I've called you because this is, like, to me at this time, it's like the worst moment in my life,
Absolutely.
Right? Like, I was so scared or so helpless. I had to call somebody with a badge and a gun to come rescue me, so to speak, from the situation. And if you're just handling it the same way you handled the 10 other calls for the same exact thing, even that day, like, I get it. I get where people could be looking at it and cops suck. Cops are just dicks, like, They don't want to help me. They just want me to shut up and go back to, my miserable life or whatever. And they just want to go back to doing what they do. I guess I get that. So talk about the evolution as you're coming through as a cop. Like, I kind of understand the process, right? You go through the academy, you come out, you go through the FTO program, you go out on the street and you get into some stuff. And along the way, you are introduced to some different things. There's different task forces, there's different things. Did you do anything special in your first couple of years that drove you one direction or another? Were you exposed to anything like that?
I probably had, I don't know, maybe 2-3 years on. And again, being kind of a young, naive guy, I didn't really have a lot of world experience, and I wasn't that great at talking to a wide variety of people. And it occurred to me one day, I'm going to have to use my mouth a whole lot more than I'm going to have to use anything else that I've been trained to do. Mm-hmm. And so becoming a part of our hostage negotiations team was something that I was encouraged to do. And I got onto that team, and the training that we were provided was phenomenal.
Was it inside the department, or did they send you outside?
They sent us outside.
Okay. Yeah. So I've heard this before where sometimes they'll get, like, the FBI will come in because they're like they're supposed to be like the best at this thing or whatever. Is that what you went through?
Yep. Yeah, we went through a lot of those classes.
So talk about that. Talk about some of the things you learn and how you developed through the process.
So you had to learn to communicate. You had to basically learn to be a chameleon. You had to be able to change who you are to communicate with a very wide variety of people. And you have to be able to communicate on their level for you to build any kind of rapport, any kind of trust to be able to resolve a situation, right? If people can't trust you and what you're showing them, what your body language is showing them, the words that you're saying aren't matching, you're just going to be button heads the whole time. Mm-hmm. And so that really gave me a good perspective on the street on how to talk to various groups of people, be on their level, gain their trust. Mm-hmm. You learn how to think of things in a little bit different mentalities based on kind of what you're dealing with, right? So we were part of a hostage negotiations team. You think of that as, like you're in the movies, right? How often do people really take people hostage?
I don't know, man. How often does it happen? Tell me.
It's a very rare deal, right? Okay. But how often are we out because people are having the worst day of their lives and they're having a crisis that they're either wanting to commit suicide or whatever else that may be.
I imagine that's the majority of the calls.
It's constant. And then the relationship that they're in, depending on what's going on, changes how you want to negotiate with them and how you want to talk with them, right? And how you want to gain intelligence from them, from their family, to be able to talk and resolve the situation. Because not everything is the same, not even close. No two negotiations are the same.
So I can imagine, again, from the outside looking in, people might look at this as being very disingenuous. Like, you're just playing this game, and that's why we can't trust you as police officers. What do you say to that?
Well, I can tell you, especially from the hostage negotiation side, if I didn't want to do it and it was just a game and it wasn't genuine to me, I wouldn't be in that position. And all the people that are on my team are in the same way. We're in it because we pour our hearts into it. We care. We want to resolve these things because it's not just the person that we're negotiating with or talking with. They've got family that's going to be affected by this. They've got friends. They've got coworkers. This incident is going to affect a lot of people. And we genuinely want a good resolution out of that. We don't want to have to use force. We want to talk to people, have them come to a level-headed place to make a good decision, you know?
Right, which impacts, again, all those things and all those people in a different kind of way. I mean, you just said it. I mean, it doesn't happen it's not very common. It doesn't happen a lot at a high frequency. Maybe we use that term. It's not a high frequency type of thing that you deal with, but can you talk, are you still involved with this? Can you talk about any of the incidents that you might have had that really touched you, really moved you, where you've had like success or maybe even just were not successful?
Yeah, I think we've had a lot of great success since the time that I've been on the team. A lot of the stuff has been suicidal people for the most part, you know, at their wits' end, wanting to commit suicide, leave kids behind, those sorts of things.
Like with a gun in their mouth kind of thing, or in their hand, or knife, or something else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So they're like barricaded in their house or apartment or whatever it happens to be.
We've had people up on top of hotels wanting to jump off. People driving around in cars that are going to, commit suicide by driving into traffic.
So they call 911 and go, "Hey, I'm going to do this thing."
Sure. Yeah.
And so you've got dispatch that then transfers that to you while this person's driving around.
Yep.
How's that work, man?
It's tricky. It's tricky for sure.
Like, so you got to, do these people readily disclose where they are?
No.
Right?
No.
Well,
I mean, you get to the point where, you call them, right? And what do you say when you call them? Hey, this is the police.
Right.
And what do?
They hang the phone up.
Right? And so that's your starting point. You can't even have a conversation yet because they're not even ready to talk.
But it seems like they are kind of, or they wouldn't have called 911 in the first place.
Yeah, generally.
So that's they've left you a little bit of wiggle room. You just got to figure out your way in.
Yeah. So I will say that we have had some pretty good successes. There were times before I came on the team and before I became an officer that there were some pretty unfortunate circumstances where our negotiators were out talking to people that committed suicide right in front of them.
Wow.
They were done. And, those are hard, obviously, if you're that person in that position, right? You've been talking with them for hours. You're pouring your heart and soul into wanting them to do the right thing, to get them some help. And then the next thing you know, they decide differently. So, it's not an easy thing to do. You're giving a lot emotionally. You take a psychological hit from those interactions, but you kind of hang your hat on the ones that end well, that are rewarding.
I guess that you have to, man. I mean, you have to, but I would imagine there's things that get learned in the process too. As unfortunate, as tragic as the situation is, there's going to be some things that can be taken away from that to then pass down. You're not going to win them all, right. But despite trying, you're going to learn some things. Any ones that really stand out for you that were like, dude, man, we made this happen, and this one will live as like the career so far, like the career negotiation to date that you can talk about?
Man, none of the negotiations are really hitting me on that. I know what you're getting at.
Is there been that many? Or the other way to look at this too is, again, you go away to the school and you come back, like every day is a negotiation, right? Oh yeah. Every time you go out, it's like, how do we get this resolved? Whether it's a traffic ticket or, maybe something else. I would imagine like there's this every day's negotiation. So your skills are getting better. So there's probably a lot of stuff that got de-escalated or resolved without you even really being aware because you were just using your new skill set.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I just wondered if there's like a guy on top of a building wants to jump off. We spend 5 hours. We finally get him to come down. He's now, gone through recovery or whatever his issue. Yeah, I mean, we had one. Everybody wants to hear those stories, Chris.
I got you. We had one a few years ago. This guy, high out of his mind, had a pretty nasty history. He had actually, several years prior to this, had actually shot a San Jose police officer. That officer thankfully lived through that shooting. Okay. But this guy, career criminal, bad dude. He does a home invasion robbery in our city. The people are obviously calling 911. He's breaking into our house. He takes off running and he finds a hotel that's under construction that's probably between a quarter mile, half mile away. And he works his way all the way up to the roof. And somehow the officers figure out that he's up there. So I'm actually off that day. I'm not even working right now. And so the officers that are first on scene are trying to communicate with him. Well, he's 8 stories up in the air and he's 10 shades of pissed off. And there's construction tools and equipment and everything up there. And he decides it's a great idea. I'm just going to start throwing this
stuff off.
Right? Throwing hammers at the cop cars and having himself a fun day. So that turns into a full-blown call out for us. So I come in from home with the rest of my team and we start trying to communicate with him. They end up using a drone and flying a cell phone up to the top. Because like I said, it was probably like 8 stories up. Right?
Wait. Okay, hold on. Let's talk about this. So you guys got tools like drones and stuff. I never even thought about this either. I mean, the different types of technology that are available to you. This is fascinating. Flying a cell phone up top. Because back in the day, I mean, I watched all the cop shows when I was a kid. They had the bag phone, right? And they'd throw it into the room or whatever else. Or miraculously in the movies, they always have the bad guy's phone number. The bad guy always has the direct line to, Al Pacino, who's the negotiator outside, right? Like that's not the reality. We drone flight in cell phones. Okay, sorry. I got to get my head around that.
It was a first for us too. I don't think we'd ever had to deploy a phone that way before.
Wow. Okay. All right. So guy gets phone.
I mean, the alternative was we had a patrol car on the ground. We're trying to use the PA speaker. And then how can you hear that?
You can't hear him. Yeah.
Right. So they use a drone. They get a cell phone up to him. So now we can at least talk. So a couple of the guys get on the phone. They start negotiating with him. And like I said, he's just high out of his mind. And so how do you really negotiate with somebody like that? I mean, we've all been at the bar with our drunk friends. You can't even negotiate with people right? Yeah. So
it's time to go, man.
So this is hours long, and he wants cigarettes and he wants food and he wants all this stuff, right? And so they start trying to get him some things, but we at the same time are working our way up the building, and we're at the roof hatch right below where he's at, and it starts getting to a point where obviously the negotiation over the phone is not working. But
you're stalling.
We're stalling. We're trying to get him to do the right thing, but he's not wanting to. So eventually we got to go up there. Eventually something's got to come to a resolution.
Push is going to come to shove, yeah.
Right. And the fear of going up there is, like you said, push comes to shove, right? And nobody wants to get into a fight on a roof and get thrown off of a roof.
There's power tools and shit up there still.
Right. It's not the best of environments. But so we take a team up there. When we get up there, he ends up getting rid of the cell phone that with the negotiator he had been talking to for hours, which really kind of didn't bode too well with us, because now we're having to create a whole new rapport with him and he doesn't know who we are.
Starting over.
Right. But now he's afraid because there's, 8 or 10 cops up on the roof that are challenging him. So now, does he want to talk now? So that we had to build that back up. We had to, I've never had to throw a burrito at somebody to try to get them to want to talk with me. They were throwing,
the guy wants food, so you can have the food, but no, dude, I have your food. You got to talk to me.
Yeah, come closer. So,
good Lord.
Yeah, so this went on for hours. He's threatening to jump. We're worried about, getting into a physical altercation with him a little bit on top of the roof because none of us want to end up falling off, But ultimately, we had a good resolution. We didn't have to use any kind of force with him. It took me talking him into a burrito and giving him a pack of cigarettes that only had 3 cigarettes in it. I said, you can smoke these 3 and then it's time to be done and go down.
Wow.
And it worked itself out. He ended up giving up to us, let us put him in handcuffs. We didn't have to fight with him. We didn't have to use any force. And it resolved itself. But that took a massive amount of resources, took a lot of cops, took a lot of hours. And I would say that in the end, 100% worth it. No one got hurt. No one died. That's a win. And that's what we always look for.
Yeah. I mean, you said resolved itself. I don't know if it resolved itself. I mean, you guys put a lot of effort into it. That resolution, sounds like it, again, you just mentioned resources and time and all those things. Meanwhile, there's plenty of other things happening out on the street that probably could have been attended to. And I don't want to take away from this that you came in on your day off. I mean, it's part of your job, right? But I assume you're sitting at home with the family and you get the call, hey, dude, start rolling. We have this thing going on. So that's I look at kind of life and, things like this is like deposits and withdrawals.
Yeah.
And, you if you keep withdrawing more than you deposit, the obvious comes out of that. Ultimately, you're going to be overdrawn. And there are things that banks and, credit card companies and things have put in place, for protection mechanisms like, okay, well, we're going to tack this fee on, we're going to tack this fee on. But in the game of life, those fees, those overdrawn type of penalties manifest in a lot of different ways. And all of this time, like I'm sure you weren't the only officer that had to come in off duty to come do that. So you're doing this extra work, so to speak. Then, all right. So after hours and hours and hours of this, then what happens? You just go, okay, we're done. You drive home. That's it. Then back to work the next day.
Yeah.
Somebody else is handling the paperwork, whatever. It's okay. We went through this. Okay. So I learned that in some cases, if I throw burritos and 3 cigarettes at somebody, this might work. But after that, like, was there any kind of like a after action, like get together, debrief with how that whole situation went down? Or was that just like, okay, well, we did what we were supposed to do. Now we're moving on to the next thing. We'll wait for the next call.
Oh, no, we definitely debrief every situation.
Okay, let's talk about that. Yeah, talk about how that process looks for you.
We get together as a team and we talk about, from the very beginning to when the incident kicked off, who was here, can you talk about everything, the call out, everybody getting on scene, everybody establishing what role they're going to be in, what their responsibilities are. We break all that down. How did that work out? Did that work out good? Everybody comfortable in that? Who did the negotiating? How did you feel? What are things that we can learn from? Who set up all of our technology? The various equipment that we use. How did that go? Did everything work? Did it not work? Is there stuff we need to get fixed? Did we learn from this? Putting a cell phone on a drone. We'd never done that before. Probably, I don't think we'd ever even up to that point thought of it.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by that.
So that's something new, right? So that gave us some new ideas to think about, to talk about, and we go from the beginning to the end. It all gets written in a document for us so that we can always remember. Mm-hmm. And it also feeds into like, what are our needs? What equipment do we need coming up that will help us do better in the future?
So I have a question here, if I could just time out for a second. So the people that are involved in this debrief, are these basically the people that were on the ground there at the incident, like the team? Like, and what I'm really asking is, are there people from outside? And so I'm gonna tangent here for a second and go, usually when we hear about this stuff, we only hear about it when the bad shit's gone down, when there's been an O.I.S. or somebody has died, right? And it's been blown up. And now other people are involved. We have like a third-party investigation that's happening, or we have like city council that's getting involved, or there's some third-party representative that's involved in these meetings. But it seems we only ever hear about those people being involved in the meetings when the shit's gone bad. Do they get involved? Are there other people involved in this to help document, like, well, this is what's normal, right? This is a good outcome, or do they only walk in when there's let's just say more of a tragic outcome?
Yeah, the big muckety mucks, if you will, your city council, your mayor.
They want all the details then.
That, right. They're only coming in for kind of the bigger things, the stuff that's going to be, politically heavy for them to have to deal with in the aftermath. So officer-involved shootings, high priority or high profile cases, those sorts of things.
So here's my thing. Like, if you only want to get involved when it comes down to that stuff, but you have no litmus for all the other things that have happened to then reflect on, to go like, well, what is normal procedure? What do they typically do? What has been my experience with this officer or this team or this department or whatever in this particular realm of stuff? Hostage negotiation. This one ended well. The next one didn't. And now I'm here. Why am I here? You're here because you have an agenda, and that's to cover your ass, or to paint the picture in a way that maybe covers some other people's asses, but somewhere down the line, the reason you're here is because you're feeling heat finally. Would you maybe be feeling less heat, or maybe would you be in a position to deal with that heat a little bit differently had you had more knowledge and experience with the teams that are dealing with this on a regular basis? Is I guess my question. So I don't know. What's your take on that?
No, you're 100% right. They only get involved when it's going to matter to them, right? When they have a dog in the fight. And unfortunately, those high up positions, they rotate quite often, right? And so these people aren't out. And a lot of times when you have a big incident like this, you're reinventing the wheel. You're having to tell these high profile people what these little teams do, why it's so important, how they normally operate. You're having to give them this whole back history, just so that they can have some kind of an understanding, so that now they can formulate their response and their involvement in this.
So it's interesting. I think there may be people that can relate to this outside of law enforcement. I think this is true in some cases in the military too, from things that I've heard, based on people that have learned or were involved in maybe conflicts or were trained in a way that was pre maybe the last 20 years. And so that was great for them in whatever conflict or whatever situation they were in, but things change. And this old way of training, this old way of thinking, we need to change because this isn't good and it's not productive or whatnot. I was once in a position in a business where a new leadership team came in, and that new leadership team ended up bringing some leaders from the outside in. And I was on a team, it was a bunch of, the people that I work with were highly skilled experts. And what I found was the guy that they brought in to basically be our boss was incompetent in many ways. And I'll say it publicly. I don't really care. I thought what they did was they ended up ruining the business, because what they had this guy doing was basically having us to have to teach him his job, while at the same time him holding us accountable for things on the day-to-day within our own job that he didn't understand what we were doing. And so what we spent more time doing was filing reports and sending information back rather than being in the field doing what we need to do. And basically, it completely destroyed the business that we were working for and the trust that we had and the relationships that we had. And I was the first guy at the round table to always stick my hand up and go, dude, you're wrong. And that didn't play well. And ultimately, I made the decision for myself, like, I can't stay here anymore. But that's almost like I can relate, because I was like, who is this fucking idiot? Like, you're coming in here because you're feeling heat from the high ups because performance isn't where it's supposed to be. But part of the reason the performance isn't where it's supposed to be is because you are running interference on that performance, or you're not giving us what we're asking you or telling you or asking you for as needs for the people that are in the field that are doing this or doing that. And I guess that's where I'm getting at with this is, unless when they start feeling heat, it starts to trickle downhill. But what are you doing in the meantime to learn about the process? And I don't want to beat it up anymore, but I think what I'm hearing and kind of what I'm learning is there's a huge disconnect, massive disconnect with policymakers with regard to what the realities of those people that have to do the job on a daily basis are. Let's go back now. So moving away from that incident, how in the last 2 years have things changed, 2 to 3 years, have things changed for you as an officer in the way you handle yourself, the way you handle the team around you as compared to previously, with basically the oversight that's coming in and the responsibility and that you have to have now versus then? I don't know if I'm formulating that question right, but I think you know what I'm getting at.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, kind of a little bit on your last topic of, we have a lot of managers and a lot of management, a lot of administrators, but we lack leadership, and we yearn for leadership.
Right.
And when you have such high turnover, or when you have people that are very politically motivated that haven't done your job or haven't done your job for 20 years, what do they know about it? And how are they going to protect you? They're not. And if you're that guy like you are, because that's generally me, of saying, hey, you're wrong and this is wrong, well, you're ostracized.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Now, you can kiss whatever promotions and all those things you want goodbye, right? Yep. But we need leadership now more than we ever have, by far. In this post-George Floyd era, I think you have the entire first responder community under such scrutiny right now that people are leaving in droves. There's a staffing crisis anywhere you look at it. And the few people that you have left that you're retaining, you're not taking care of. You're throwing them out to the wolves sometimes because you're not being a leader. And those people that are still left, that are still working their butts off, are burning the candle at both ends. Mm-hmm. And so they're giving you 110% all they've got. And what are they getting in return from that? Well, they're not getting an internal administration that is supporting them with leadership that cares about them. There's this great saying a friend of mine said, here at this, whatever agency, here at our agency, family matters. just not yours.
Wow.
Right? So you have an administration that's not taking care of you. You have a bigger administration, say a city, a county, whatever, those politicians, they don't care about you. The district attorney's not doing their part. They're not holding up their end of the bargain.
Which would be what?
You have, over the last couple of years, we went to no bail. Since George Floyd was.
I'm acutely aware of this one. Yeah.
Okay, so.
Yeah, the no bail. So people, you're going to get arrested.
Stuff that you would have.
Stealing a car.
When I first became a cop, if you got caught stealing a car, you were probably getting at least a year in jail.
Right.
I mean, that was probably the least hand slapping you could get. Well, since George Floyd, what do we do now with people that steal cars? Get your ticket book out. We're gonna take that car and we're gonna give you a ticket and you're on your way. Hey, don't forget to go to court, man.
Right. Don't forget to show up.
And then when you do have a warrant, the warrant is going to be for $1. So
you don't have to. Don't even show up. Don't even show up. To
why
court.
bother? Yeah. So you're free to go out and commit tons and tons more crime with no consequence, and it only emboldens criminals to do that. And then in this society where cops are demonized and are expected to perform without a fault 100% of the time, and when we don't, we're demonized for our actions and we're considered terrible people. What are we supposed to do? You want us to arrest that guy for the 20th time when the prosecutors haven't done their job to keep him in jail? We're really having to weigh out that personal liability.
So I want to pause for a second to talk about this a little bit. I think you just painted a really clear picture. I mean, we see it. I think we're learning that in spades as a society right now, particularly here. I mean, I can speak for my neighborhood and the things that I've witnessed and encountered just here. But again, I have a lot of friends that work in a lot of different places, and they're saying, look, dude, it's no different anywhere else, man. You've got your stuff. Everybody's got their own stuff.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about, so going back, the question is like, what was it like 2 years ago, 3 years ago versus how it is now? You just mentioned, like, if my car got stolen out front right now and a guy got a ticket, I would lose my mind. I'd literally lose my mind. And to a certain extent, I am angry about this. Because I see the aftermath of it right here in front of my business. I live a couple of blocks from here. Like, it shows up. Going back to the no bail, a very close acquaintance of mine who owns a local business here is also part owner of one of the biggest bail bonds companies down here in the South Bay area. And I asked him the other day. It was about a week and a half ago. It was actually the beginning, I think, of this month, and we're now in the month of September. I said, "Dude, how's the business?" Because he was like, it was really wacky there for a long time. He goes, well, they finally started putting people back in jail. The no bail thing went away, so hopefully business will pick up for us. That's the other end of this. That's kind of how I was testing this. But here's I guess the question I have going back, because now you can relate. You've been that veteran officer on the street, 10 plus years. And you were handling yourself as a law enforcement officer in a certain way, trying to keep your nose clean, making sure you're doing the right things, helping people, going into service, but also making sure that, people that stole my car, you were going to catch them and you were going to put them in jail, and they were going to at least have to go through the process of what that type of an behavior would put them through. How's it different now? How do officers, I'm not saying you specifically, but how are officers like in your position now approaching the street on a daily basis as opposed to where they were, knowing what you just said?
It goes back to what we were saying about, there's no one supporting you. You're burning the candle at both ends, and there's no one that has your back that will stand up at the end of the day and say, my guys are doing the right thing.
But is that true? I think that would be the question. Like, is that really true? Come on. Like, really?
I don't want to give that generalized, it 100% it's true.
Yeah.
It depends on where you are. It depends on where you're located. Mm-hmm. In the Bay Area here, the politics are very different than what they would be in Northern California.
It's interesting, isn't it?
And so that really plays a factor into it. So I'll give you the perspective of a Bay Area police officer, kind of a wide perspective of it, is what has changed for us is if no one is going to support you and no one is going to have your back, you got to look out for yourself and you got to look out for your brother. And I've got to look out for my own personal liability. Is what I'm about to do worth me getting sued, hurt, or put in jail? Is it worth it? Is getting in a pursuit with that stolen car to get someone their car back? That's what I want. I want to get them their car back and I want to put that guy in jail. But if this goes bad and this doesn't meet the headline test and say something happens we get in a pursuit and that guy hits a family and kills a family. It's some god-awful event, right? That we never intended, but we were trying to do our job.
Right.
Is it worth what we're going to go through? So that's really where we're at now is if our politicians don't care, if our district attorneys don't care, if all these people don't care enough, then does it need to get bad enough for the people to stand up and say, we've had enough, we need change? You know, we need to stop these problems, and you need to stop demonizing cops for doing their job.
Yeah, it's like a decriminalization of the crime and the criminals and a demonization of law enforcement. And there are responsibilities on both sides of that.
100%.
Right? There are responsibilities on both sides. You're going to have, in some cases, you're going to have some officers that are not doing a good job. And it's going to be in anything that you do. In any profession, you're going to have people that are not doing a good job. Yeah. But to come out and say the majority of people or majority of officers are that officer, I think is a very, very, that's exaggerated. That just isn't the case. And what's happening on the street is showing us that you're just seeing, in some cases, the bad ones, or this one's being portrayed as a bad one based on how they've sliced and diced the media or gone ahead and put it in the headline or whatever else. And you'll never hear about it again when that officer ends up being cleared a year later, 2 years later, or whatever, because at that point, that person's already the devil. And again, on the other side, like for the person that says, well, yeah, you shouldn't be chasing that stolen car at a high speed because yes, you could kill a family. But what is the result of not doing it over time? And I think the consequence of that is what we're seeing now, which is to your point, like one, officers are like, I don't know. I don't know if that's important enough. Is that how you want to? Because what if that stolen car has also a stolen child in it, or is connected to something that could expose something much, much bigger, and your child is part of that, or whatever the case. Again, it's like this huge mess, and there's a menagerie of people out there. And it just fries me when I look at it that don't have any clue of what you guys are going through on a daily basis. And here's the other thing, I don't hear people griping about it. I mean, I don't hear officers, they don't come to me and just say, my fucking job sucks, I hate it, and whatever else. But when I talk to the guys that I do know, and I know that they're not talking about their job anymore or even having a conversation with me about it, I get it. I totally get it. Man, I talk about maybe the car chase is a thing. Right? Like, I think a lot of people like to use that when the car chase is a thing. But what are some of the other the stuff on a daily basis that you're having to, for lack of a better term, hesitate on that's different now versus where it was before? Just some of the stuff that you would deal with maybe multiple times a day. Like, how is that dealt with different now than it was? Well,
I think you can look at kind of industry-wide right now. I think you can look at proactivity levels of officers. A long time ago, when cops weren't responding to calls, if there weren't calls holding, you were out looking for something.
They're hunting for stuff, right?
Yeah, and that's why we all got into this job. I think that has dramatically decreased because of where we're at, because of the things that have happened. Because I think there's an argument that when someone calls 911 for help and you have someone on the phone saying, this just happened to me, this is the guy that did it, I think there's an argument that it is our job to go out there and get that guy. And I think that you have a lot more backing you on an in-progress 911 call than you do if you were to just go stop Joe Schmo on an arbitrary proactive stop.
I got you. There was a call for service, right? It's been documented. It went through dispatch. So the reason you're there is because you were told to be there, right, versus your judgment's being questioned from the very, very get-go on why would you even approach this person or this situation in the first place?
Why are you messing with that guy?
Guys parked on the side of the road, right? Like it's in a dark alley. It's 3 a.m. Okay.
And everything comes into question, right? I mean, anything conceivable comes out, right? Well,
why were you
the
even
officer
there?
Targeted that guy because of his race?
Yeah.
Well, it's in a dark alley in the middle of the night.
I can't see that.
I could see the outline of someone's head through a window, but I had no idea what race he was, but that's not what the media is going to say.
Right.
Right. And so you're not going to get that backing on a proactive stop of going out and hunting, trying to find that stuff. You're just not.
So as a result, we're waiting for calls.
I think a lot of agencies have gotten that to that point. We're waiting for calls a lot more than we are being proactive. And not to say the cops aren't proactive anymore at all.
I
think people are just using much more conservative decision-making and judgments on what they're going to do in a proactive call rather than just going out and lighting the world on fire trying to solve crime, you know?
Well, how's that working out for us, Chris? I mean, what's the consequence of this out on the street right now?
I think we're seeing it every day. And that's in a combination of a lot of the new laws that have gone into place in the last 10 years. I mean, decriminalizing drugs, and look at the consequence that has had for our homeless population. It's exploding. Yeah. And what are we doing to take care of all these people, right? We've amended the laws that have put these people in a lot of the places that they're in, and they don't want the cops to arrest their way out of that problem. They're homeless. They don't deserve to be in jail is what we get told. You know, and so our society, your quality of life, you want to walk your kids to school in San Francisco, you got to walk through a homeless encampment to get there.
Right.
You're stepping over feces and you're stepping over drugs. And
yeah, this goes back to the policies and the politicians. I mean, the pendulum ends up swinging so far one way, it has to come back. And we're on that other back end. So we were arresting people for, you know, whatever, 10 years ago. You know, you have an ounce of fucking weed and you're going to jail, and for years. Like, and if that's not your first offense, if it's your second or third offense, you're getting put away for a long time. That was the extreme over there. Now we're back all the way on the other end where basically carrying any amount is not a problem unless you got a trunk full of it, maybe. But again, it's been decriminalized. Usually what you see is, again, there has to be this swing back. At what point does it need to get to, maybe in your experience, where it kind of starts to swing back the other way? I mean, you mentioned the people standing up and going, like, we've had enough. Like, how does that happen? When?
To be honest with you, I don't really know. I mean, this is the first time in my career. I've been a cop 13 years. This is the first time that I've seen this pendulum swing so far and almost get stuck where it's at. But I can say if you follow the news and you look and you see the bad district attorneys that we've had, Gavin Newsom, or I'm sorry, not Chesa Boudin.
Oh, we can talk about him if you want. I love that topic, but we can stay away.
My blood pressure might go up a little bit, but I mean, look at the people of San Francisco became fed up enough to recall him. So is that showing the pendulum is starting to swing back? Maybe. Yeah, I hope so. I don't know. I don't think any of us have an answer.
I know,
for
it's all speculation. So, yeah, I got you.
Can I hope and pray that we are starting to swing back in the right direction? I sure hope so. Because my family is part of this community. My friends are part of this community. They've all been victimized in one way or another. Mm-hmm. You know, it wasn't too long ago. My grandparents called me in, 5 o'clock in the morning, their catalytic converter got stolen.
Wow.
I mean, it's just it's a run-of-the-mill property crime, right? It's not something that's the biggest of deals, but does it impact my grandparents? Yeah, because the car they stole it off of is the car that they have to tow behind their motorhome to go on their trips, and they were supposed to go on a trip that week, and they couldn't go, right? So no one's immune to it, and it's sad when we see it affecting the people that we know and love, and we want nothing more than for it to swing back, to be in a happy medium, you know?
So what are things like, again, like things that you're seeing out there as far as the pendulum swinging and it being all the way, let's just say, to the left right now, like it's being decriminalized, but now you're going out on the street every day. What are you seeing on the streets? I mean, you just mentioned like your grandparents, and that sucks. And people say, okay, so they were mildly inconvenienced. They just call their insurance company. It gets fixed and whatever. But that attitude is probably, it's a bigger part of the problem is what you're saying. It's like, oh, it's not my problem until it becomes your problem. And then when they call 911, they expect you to show up right away. But I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, so what are you seeing on the street, like right now on the daily that in terms of this pendulum going all the way to the left side, and how it impacts people and their interactions and the decisions they're making and the things that they're doing as Joe citizen out there on the street, not necessarily how they feel about you, right, as a police officer, but what's the attitude on the street now compared to where it was even a couple of years ago? I mean, you mentioned the criminals just like, they're just doing whatever they want, whenever they want.
Oh, they know there's no recourse to their actions. And if it is, it's small, it's minor. They don't care.
They get a ticket for stealing a car, big deal, right?
Right.
And a $1 bail, like, man, I could just do this every day. Like, I can steal 5 cars and only have to pay $5,
right?
Kind of thing.
Yep. And it's what's sad is, I think so many people in our community are also being desensitized that they're getting to a place where this is okay. This is normal.
Yeah.
You know,
that's what I was asking.
At our local library got overrun with homeless people. And to me, the library is a place where you take children to learn, where it should be a safe environment. And when it's okay for people that say, well, it's okay, we're used to it now. They're giving them resources and they're doing these things. Well, at what point is it not okay anymore? At what point have we affected society so much that things need to change, but we're almost brainwashing, or people are almost becoming brainwashed to think that this level of crime and this level of societal issues, I'm trying to think of the right words for it, is acceptable. It's okay now, where it was never okay before. And I don't know where we go from there. I don't know how that all gets fixed and that gets changed. It'll never be okay for me. I'm not going to send my kid into that library. You know, it's dangerous. I know it's dangerous, but then I get told that, it's because of my viewpoint as a cop, right? But at what point is society going to say, all right, enough's enough. We need to get back to some normalcy. Yeah, you use the term. We used a couple terms here, desensitized at one point. And you just kind of said, maybe it isn't, but maybe it is, brainwashed. I think we're saying the same thing. There's been a filtration or a scrubbing of, what people see as acceptable or not acceptable. And again, the more you see it, the more acceptable it likely becomes. And that trickles down, or it gets amplified when you start walking into people that are working maybe in the first responder community, because they're seeing more and more and more of it all the time. But they're having to deal with it versus, I don't send my kids to the library anymore, so why should I care? That's not my problem. That's somebody else's problem. And yeah, it sucks, but I don't care enough to say anything or do anything or influence. It's not going to influence how I vote or whatever. That's just, it is what it is. That's just the world we live in now. So we have to get used to it. So what does that do? Again, so now coming back to the officer side of things and walking into things, you have your viewpoint. You have these calls that you're going out on, and you have to think through the personal liability and how is this going to impact things differently than it did before. What does that do to the psyche? What does that do to the emotional state? The stress level. And again, that's broad. Stress is a broad term, but it really isn't. But how do officers deal with that? How are you dealing with that now? I can say that in my 13 years, it has changed a lot. When I was new, I was gung-ho. I was that excited officer to be out there. And we would go through critical incidents, and it would bug me a little bit, but then I would kind of move on, right? But in the 13 years to where I've gotten to now, which isn't that, it's half of a career. If you make it through an entire career, True. There's a lot of anyway. Yeah. It's not necessarily one incident that really starts setting you off. It's the totality of them. It's the ongoing trauma that you have to deal with every day. Mm-hmm. And it unfortunately is what that makes you become and how that affects you as a human, right? When I got into this job with my friends, I'll say we all, roughly around the same age, had a lot of the same hobbies and interests before we got into this. If you were to ask any of us, do you guys still do those same things? No, we don't. Do you guys, still have the same friends? No, not a lot of them. It changes you as a person a lot. Sometimes it's for the best or for the good. A lot of times the changes are negative, and it doesn't just affect you. It affects your family when you go home to your family, your kids, your spouse, mm-hmm. your extended family. It affects your friends, some of the stuff that we've talked about so far today, mm-hmm. These aren't conversations I could have with all of my friends mm-hmm. because they have very different views. And there's a lot of risk there, right? Yeah. And sometimes you risk ruining a friendship or a relationship because you start getting into these conversations and, you have very different viewpoints, and it can really spark some fires. And that messes with you too. These people that you've loved and have been friends with for so long, it's hard not to feel like, how could you take their side and not take my side? I'm the one that gives the blood, sweat, and tears every day, right? But
that seems valid, man.
It's one of those things, the long-term effects of being a first responder, it really starts to wear on you over time. You know, your cup can only get so full before it overflows. And, you know, they hire us because we're very type A people. We're strong people. We're strong physically. We're strong emotionally, right? We can compartmentalize a lot of these things. But at some point, you've built up so much over the years that if you haven't done a good job to deal with it, you're really setting yourself up for failure.
It's a blessing and a curse, right? Being able to organize things that way. Yeah. I would also imagine, so 13 years in, let's just say for the first 10 years, you deal with those things, you file those things a little bit differently, right? And there's cumulative stuff, and I'm sure we haven't really gotten into any of that, but I'm sure there's things and incidences along the way. You mentioned the one that ended positively, a guy on roof. But those things, again, they fill your cup or your bucket or your backpack, whatever analogy we're using, your box of stuff. And then the whole George Floyd incident happens, right? And now there's that much more scrutiny. There's that much more. Does that just take room out of the box, or does that just fill the box up even more? And does it then escalate or amplify the things that happen after? I don't know if that's a clear question or not. Like in terms of like what this incident before, let's just say maybe we put in like a number on it. So this incident before on a scale of 1 to 5 would have been a 2 for me from a stress impact perspective. You know, so that goes into the 2 section in my box, right? And as the number go up in terms of stress, you have, you know, you take up more and more, like, you know, there's more volume being taken up. So it goes into a 2 versus now, what was a 2 before, does that now equate to like a 4 or even a 5 because of this cumulative, the cumulative impact of everything, but also like, is it now amplify? There's like an X factor on top of it over these last couple of years with the things that you've just sort of articulated.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It used to be, you would think of the stress of just being during that incident, you know, and that the average person would think, well, you made it through that incident. The stress is over. You can go back to a baseline. And I got to tell you, that is 100% the exact opposite of what happens to us. You go through a critical incident, a lot of times the stress that you go through during that physical incident is going to be a lot less than the stress that you're going to feel in the aftermath.
You mean from a psychological and emotional perspective?
And even a physiological perspective. Right. Absolutely.
Right. There's a lot of things. We've talked about some of those things on the show before, but, you know, like the example of, again, the box and filling the box up. I guess when I look at that, you learn tools, you have skills to kind of deal with those things. But as these critical moments happen in life, right? And when you're working the line of work that you're in, those are much more frequent. Intensity levels are way different. But I look at, like, again, like everything that's happened in the last few years, sociopolitically, the whole COVID-19 thing, the whole world got exposed to a certain amount of stress in a certain amount of time. And what I've recognized and what I've learned is people just don't have the bandwidth to handle conversations like you were talking about. So there's all this cumulative stuff that's there. They haven't been able to deal with it right. They don't really have the right outlets. They're getting these inputs from all these different places that might not be healthy. They're engaged in behaviors that might not be healthy, which just encourage more of the same type of behavior. And in certain cases, getting involved in certain groups on Instagram or whatever might be going on. And I guess I think what my point is they're feeling like they don't have the bandwidth to deal with this stuff. So they have to take a side. They have to find a camp to get into because now I feel safe or I've got some agency. I feel supported over here. And so if I just stay here, I'm going to be right. I'm going to be okay. And I can avoid all that other stuff. But in law enforcement, you don't get that choice, right? You don't get that choice of avoiding all that stuff. You have to deal with it. You have to face it head on every day. And so the bandwidth I imagine for you're just dudes, right? You're just ladies and dudes, just like anybody else at the end of the day that deal with their stuff. Similarly, you might have a little bit more training and a little bit more experience in it, but you also have that much more volume of it in a lot of cases based on the stuff that we're dealing with. Oh man, in terms of now piling on like a very, let's just say like a critical incident to that stuff. The conversations that I've been having with people lately are it's finally like my box is fucking full. Like this was it. This is the tipping point. And going back to what you were saying before, we're having people leaving in droves that are in the law enforcement community because likely that cumulative stress plus maybe one or more other incidents, which is in the past may have been 2s for them, are now 5s or 6s that just don't fit in the box right anymore. There's just no more room, are driving people out. And we have people coming in that really have no idea about any of this stuff yet, or coming from a much different place. But maybe you could talk about what you're seeing out there, and particularly maybe personally with regard to how these incidents are stacking up now versus how they were before. I mean, maybe there's some examples you can share.
Yeah. I think in the entirety of my career, I've never seen burnout with first responders like I've seen it in the last couple of years. Hands down. People just absolutely burn out, and people that had never thought of doing anything other than what they were doing, had no plan of doing anything differently, up and leave because you're right, their box is full. And it's not worth it to them anymore. And it's sad. And I know a lot of this personally. I know a lot of my close friends have dealt with a lot of this stuff very personally. And you're absolutely right that, incidents that are happening today are significantly more difficult to deal with than incidents that have happened in the past. So I'll share a story with you and give you some of my perspective, what I went through, and then talk about some of what my friends have been through in similar types of situations.
Mm-hmm.
So about a year and a half or so ago, we were involved in an officer-involved shooting incident. On that day, I was just your run-of-the-mill patrol canine, and I got asked by our plainclothes task force to come out and give them a hand. They were trying to apprehend a known criminal. They knew this dude had a very long, bad history. He had recently been seen with guns. Highway Patrol had recently contacted him. He had a gun on him. He took off in a pursuit. We knew he's a bad dude. And so the idea was we needed to get him. Our gun violence had been through the roof, and we needed to grab onto this guy so that we could try to start to quell some of this stuff. So our plainclothes guys ended up tracking him to a hotel in our city. And we set up surveillance on it. We developed a plan. I mean, we had everything accounted for to a T. And we knew where the guy's car was parked. We knew that he was inside the hotel. We set up accordingly. When he came out of the hotel, the plan was going to be that I was going to challenge him with my partners. We were in a minivan together. We call it a heavy van.
Okay.
So I've got 2 SWAT operators in the van with me, and then I sit in the back of an unmarked minivan. This was a Honda Odyssey, so your average soccer mom minivan, and you got cops.
It's not a lot of space in there, especially if everybody's kitted out.
Well, yeah, and nobody's expecting cops to come flying out of this thing.
Yeah.
So, our guy comes out, and the 3 of us are there.
Is the dog in there too?
Yep.
Oh man, yeah, it's a party.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So nobody's expecting that, but the element of surprise is in our favor on that. Mm-hmm. So, dude comes out of the hotel. We see him come to the door. He's looking around. He probably got tipped off. The cops were there. He comes out the door. I hop out of the van, and I immediately challenge him, and he takes off running. So the fact that we know he's armed, we know that he runs, like all this stuff, we're going to use the dog. Dog's a perfect, less lethal tool. It's going to grab him. So we chase him through the parking lot. He ends up pulling out a gun. He's trying to shoot my dog. He's pointing it at us, trying to shoot it at us. What we didn't know was we believed that at some point when the dog took him down, his gun actually broke. It was not operable at that point in time.
So wait, he's pulling the trigger, but the gun's malfunctioned.
Well, what's funny is we never even found the trigger to the gun.
What?
Yeah. So we speculate. I mean, he's a bad dude. He's not going to pull a fake gun or a non-operating gun on us. That's not who he is. So I don't know. Our guardian angels somehow got us on.
Yeah, nobody's carrying a gun that doesn't have a trigger in it.
Right.
With as easy as it is to get a gun anyway, if you had a broken gun or didn't have a trigger, this dude could easily resource another one.
My dog's on bite on his arm, ripped him off his feet, got him on the ground.
Okay.
He's on bite on his arm, and he's trying to contact shot the dog in the head. And the gun's not going off. And so he's punching the dog in the head with the gun, and we're yelling at him, and he keeps coming out. He's pointing out on us, and he's probably just as surprised that his gun's not going off, right? But We don't know what's going on. So anyway, long and the short of it is that ends up being an officer-involved shooting. Two of my partners fire and hit him. He ends up being deceased on scene right there.
We did timeout. Okay, so we have a dog on bite, bad guy with gun, bad guy's trying to shoot the dog. The dog that's on bite. And there's a wrestling match that's going on right now. And then there's officers all around that are watching all this go down, and the guy's pulling the gun. Now he's pointing the gun at you guys. This is all happening very fast.
Oh, yeah.
How far are the officers from this wrestling match that are going on?
So when we sent the dog, he actually goes into a wide open parking lot with no other cars.
Okay.
And so me and two other guys are on foot running after him, and then everybody else that had set up surveillance is pulling cars in, kind of converging.
Okay.
So the distances kind of varied. I was probably 20-ish yards by the time I stopped running. When I realized that he had a gun, some of the guys were much closer. But, 10, 15 yards maybe. But right up close enough that you're not going to have to aim that hard to hit
you're point shooting
a broad target, right? Yeah, you're almost point shooting at that point.
But the dog doesn't hold still when he's on bite, so they're flopping around in there.
Especially the more he fought the dog on that one, the dog really committed.
Sure. How many bites does your dog have?
That was bite number 11.
Okay, so this is not your first rodeo. This is not the dog's first rodeo. So he's doing his job. You see the gun come out. You see what's going on. What's going through your mind? I mean, and by the way, I don't even know what the protocol would be. At this point, the dog's not on a long line or anything. You sent the dog running. So are you committed to also drawing your weapon at this point? So are you aiming at the suspect and your dog?
That was a big part of the issue in this whole thing was I didn't. The way that we train it, the canine operators always have lethal cover, and we all have our roles and our responsibility. And as far as I was concerned in that moment of time, all I wanted was my dog to come off and create space and let my guys
do what they need to do.
Get the work done, right? And my job is to deal with the dog. That's why I'm the handler. That's why I'm there. And I'm the only one that can do it. It's not like if I don't do it, somebody else will pick up that work. Mm-hmm. So that was an issue. And I had, we all run our dogs on e-collars. And I had an e-collar failure that day. If you could ever pick the worst day to have an e-collar failure, I found it.
Shit.
So
you're trying to out the dog.
Yep.
And you're trying to stim the dog to do this. Now, I'm not completely familiar, but I've been around this enough and use an e-collar with my own dog. You go into the situation prepared.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean, everybody's checking hey, are we ready to go? You're hitting the button and you're trying to out him, and he's going to work.
Yep.
And until you tell him to out and he gets the signal, he's just going to keep going.
And to backtrack a little bit, that was his second bite of that day. And
so he switched on.
He was switched on, but
it was fine before.
Failures,
it was fine before.
Exactly. So my dog, I run the e-collar at probably 25% of what it's capable of, and that's where my dog's comfortable. And during that shooting, as I'm yelling for him to come off and I'm stimming him and he's not coming off, I crank it up to 100.
Yeah, so that's going to be my next question, because this would be the same thing if I don't get recall from my dog at whatever I know that typical setting is, or she's really whatever.
Yeah.
She switched on. Well, we just crank that thing up. She comes right back.
Oh, yeah.
Right back.
Yep.
And so that's not working.
There was no change.
There's no change in behavior.
You can tell. I mean, you use an e-collar, you can see their fur moving. They're getting some juice,
or they give you a little wiggle once you crank it up to a certain amount, which is not the idea. The idea is to keep it down below so that they get just enough to recognize, well, I don't want that level, so I'm gonna obey whatever's was supposed to be happening here, dude. So you have enough time to. Well, is there another button that goes to 100? Basically, you can go max level if...
there's a dial.
Okay, so you had to go to your dial. So this is all going down. You had to go to your dial, dial it up, and you're stimming. He's still not responding.
And I'm getting no reaction.
What's going through your head, man?
I thought for sure I was losing my dog. No doubt. I thought for sure.
I have to imagine.
I thought for sure that I was losing the dog when I was watching him trying to contact shot over the head.
So this, yeah.
And I thought, okay, that's it. Dog's done, right? He's not going to survive a contact shot to that. Mm-hmm. And then when my partners start laying down some fire, I'm like, there's no way. I mean, the dog's all over this dude. You don't have to miss by much, or you get a through and through. Mm-hmm. It's still going to hit the dog.
Still going to hit the dog.
I thought
it's all bad.
Right.
This is all kinds of fucked up.
Yeah. So that was definitely the worst day to have a malfunctioning piece of equipment, right?
So you got an equipment, you got a bad guy with a gun. Fortunately, he had a bad day with the malfunction as well. Man, moon, sun, and stars there. All right. So the guy takes a couple shots from a couple of the other officers, ultimately does not make it. Yeah. Does not survive those. And you got to go get the dog off bite. So So we end up, we get a team together. I tell my supervisors, thankfully, 2 supervisors that are on scene are former canine handlers. So, oh, wow.
So it worked out real well. I said, hey, he's not coming back. We got to go get him. And you can hear in the video, you can hear me screaming for him to come back. He's not coming back. So
I'm sure, yeah.
He, if we didn't go get him, he'd still be out there right now on that bite. He ain't letting go. So we got a team together. We got a shield up. We got a group of guys. We went up there. We kicked the gun out of his hand. We were able to get control of him. I was able to get control of the dog, hard out the dog, get him back. Mm-hmm. My teammates dealt with the suspect, rendered medical aid, and did all that kind of stuff. My dog is all black. He's jet black, and you're not going to see blood on black fur very well, right?
We talked about this, like carrying black gloves on duty and not being able to see the color of the fluid that may or may not be on your hands.
Totally.
They're tactical, but it's not cool when you're in one of those critical situations.
Yeah, so it's funny. I pull him back, and I'm like, checking him.
Is he wearing a ballistic vest?
No.
Is that not part of the department policy, or you choose not to? I mean, people have questions about this. I do. Why wouldn't you be why wouldn't you be? Were you wearing a ballistic vest?
Yeah.
So why isn't your dog wearing a ballistic vest, man?
So there's no policy for it for the canines. It's really a preference type of an issue. For me, they're hot, they're heavy, they're cumbersome for the dog, and you want them to wear that 12 hours a day, out searching, out working. You're wearing them out faster. I prefer to run my dog naked. It's less that suspects are going to grab onto or going to grab and try to physically pull the dog off bite. I prefer not to. I think that the chances of the dogs getting shot is significantly less than the dogs getting stabbed on calls. And those ballistic vests don't stop knife wounds anyway.
Really?
No, you can stab right through those.
Wow, I had no idea. Unlike if you're wearing plates, obviously the knife's going
right. Yeah,
plates, but you can't put plates on a dog.
Right. Yeah, your soft armor not going to do well. And most dogs get shot in the head and the face by suspects as they're coming in for the bite.
Right, because it's the narrow profile.
Right, and the suspects are just trying to lay down on what they can see. And you can wear a ballistic vest, not going to protect you from getting shot in the head and the face.
So you've done the math, man, and the odds, and you've been doing this long enough. This is the decision you made. Some might argue, hey, that's a bad idea, but there's going to be 2 camps for everything.
Exactly, and I don't blame the guys that do it. It doesn't hurt to be safe, right? It's just something that I've chosen not to do,
So he comes off, you hard out him, which basically means, for those of people that don't know, maybe you can explain that. My limited knowledge on this is effectively you've got to go in there, get underneath that collar and get enough of that collar to where the dog has a tough time breathing and recognizes, oh, it's time for me to let go.
Right.
Which would be the equivalent of the e-collar working and doing what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And then what, man? You just start covering the dog, just trying to figure it out, looking for holes.
Yep. I'm rubbing my hands on every square inch of his body and
breaking
just
everything.
Looking at you assumed
you just have to find it. He's hit. Yeah. You know he's hit. Yeah. Well, in 100%. Your head. Yeah.
Yeah. So I check him out, and I just can't believe that I don't find any blood. Can't believe it. Right. Well, I guess the funny side to this is he obviously had been on bite for a little while, so he's got a lot of suspect blood around his face. Mm-hmm. So as I'm kind of, checking his body and stuff, he rubs his face up and he gives me a kiss.
Oh, shit.
Rubs his face across my face. Well, I don't know.
I don't know if that's funny or not, man.
So our patrol sergeant gets on scene and he comes running up and he's like, dude, are you okay? What's wrong? And he's grabbing me. And I'm like, what? I'm fine. What? I'm fine. He's like, you got blood all over your face. Do you? He's like, yo, all over the whole side. I guess I look like, came out of Braveheart or something, but so, it's the little things.
Geez. But yeah, I mean, so obviously everybody's checking everybody at this point because there's been bullets flying. And so Dog comes off. I mean, at what point? I mean, the adrenaline and the cortisol is at a all-time high. I mean,
sure.
I mean, I can imagine you've been in other incidents, but this is pretty crazy. And hats off to the other officers and their marksmanship.
Oh,
I don't care at what level. Do you guys run dots? Red dots?
Our SWAT guys do. Some of our firearms instructors do. I know they're trying to transition us to it. I don't think either one of them had gotten red dots at the time of this.
So I should ask that question for those nerds out there that are wondering, like, what was he shot with? Was he shot with a carbine? Was he shot with a pistol?
Both of them shot 9mm.
9mm.
Yep.
Basically a jiu-jitsu match happening on the ground with the suspect and a dog, and they did not hit the dog.
No.
Can I ask where those rounds were placed?
Yeah. One of the officers, they both told me after the fact they did everything they could to not hit my dog. And I got to love them for it because, our dog's a tool. And I know that if that ultimate sacrifice needs to be made, we're going to make it. But I appreciate them in that probably most stressful incident of their life too.
Can't imagine.
Taking that little bit of time, right? One of the guys threw his first round, actually. He was telling me that he was pulling the trigger and the dog kind of flipped over the top of the suspect. And as he's going, he pulled that round down. And it actually went through the bumper of one of the cars that was set up for cover. Mm. And they both were required. They both did the best torso placements that they could. Mm. And I want to say there were quite a few rounds that went into the lower back, just kind of based on the angles and how that all went down. I believe, I've never seen the autopsy report, but I believe that there was a round that traveled up his spine that was turned the light switches off.
Yep. Wow. The reason I ask is not to be gory or add. No. I don't want to sensationalize this. For those people that spend time on the range and, shooting paper, standing still, or even maybe doing a little moving and shooting, and your target's on the ground and it's rolling around and you have something else that you don't want to shoot on top of it. What a crazy situation. And that sounds like some pretty fantastic marksmanship under duress.
Yeah, and I got to say, I got to appreciate their restraint too. There was 2 shooters in 2 different positions, and I want to say 7 or 8 rounds total. And there were a lot of other guys out there that probably could have just started shooting.
Right. And you see this quite frequently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sympathetic fires. Right. That's a real thing. And I'm really glad that everybody had that restraint, that, they didn't need to shoot. That job was being handled and taken care of and worked out really well. But that's what happens when you work with guys that are at a very high level of training and proficiency, right?
And that is the point. And if you hadn't said it there, I would have got to it later with why our officers need more training, not less training, or an assumption that they've had enough once they've graduated the academy. But I digress. We'll move back to that one, I think. Okay, so we left off with you've got blood on your face, and you're able to finally walk away from this knowing, or still knowing, but probably not believing it, that your dog has not been shot and he's not dead.
Yep.
What happens next? You go back, because you weren't a shooter, do you get sequestered? Like all of this, how does this work now? Yeah,
so we all essentially kind of got sequestered once everything stabilized on scene. They went through, figured out who were shooters, what was everybody's involvement, who were going to be witnesses, all this kind of stuff, right? So they identified the 2 shooters, and then they identified me as the canine handler as being the one that initiated the use of force. And what was crazy was they asked me, hey, do you want legal representation? Do you want an attorney?
So why do I need this?
Well, I mean, I thought about it for a minute, and I'm like, I don't know. And then it really hit hard. No, you initiated a use of force that led
to a person
dying. My actions potentially down the road are going to be heavily scrutinized, right? And it could be spun in a million different ways as to how they wouldn't have had to shoot him if I would have done something differently, right? And so I said, yeah, of course I want an attorney. Why wouldn't I want someone looking out for my own personal best interest? So,
wow. Yeah.
So that I kind of want to separate them a little bit here, in that shooting incident was obviously stressful. Was obviously stressful for all of us. That's a big deal. It's not something that we do every day. It's not something that we take lightly. Yeah, there was a lot of stress in that. And when it was over, there was an awful lot of relief. But I think it's important that people understand that just because that incident is over doesn't mean that you go back to baseline and you immediately return to normal and you feel good. What you go through after that is miserable. Absolutely miserable.
Can you detail that for us?
Yeah. So we all go back to the police station to get sequestered. Like I said, this is essentially now considered a homicide investigation, right? We are all potentially suspects of a homicide. So the district attorney's office has to come out. They send out investigators. They've got to interview everybody. They've got to research law, your policy. They've got to make sure that everything that was done correctly in accordance with established law and procedure, right? And if there's stuff that's not, they got to look into it, right? But that doesn't happen, in the 45-minute TV show with 3 commercial breaks, right? So we go back to the PD. I'm in my own conference room. We're waiting around for hours. I get to talk to my attorney for a little bit, just as a, kind of brief him as to what happened and what my role was and that kind of thing. And then there's so much going on that they said, hey, we're not going to get to your guys' interviews. Why don't you guys go home? So they decide we can go home, but as a part of our critical incident stuff at work, we have a clinician that would come in as part of our peer support team. Yep. Right. They want to check in with you. They want to make sure you're okay. They want to give you some advice. So this is part of my issue with how these things go down is the door blows open to the conference room that I'm sitting in, and in comes our clinician. And
it's just you in there?
It's me and one other guy keeping me company.
Okay. So they got an officer that's assigned to you during this time. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there just like I am right now. I've got an energy drink on the table and I don't say a word, and that door blows open. And first thing out of her mouth is, I already don't like what I see. Energy drinks aren't good for you. And I'm like, listen, lady, I'm having a bad day. I'm exhausted. I've been up a lot of hours.
Don't fucking lecture me.
Please, I already have a mother.
Yeah.
Give me a break. But she's supposed to be our therapist, right? She's supposed to be that one that...
I don't, maybe she's trying to bring some comedy to the table or to, some lightheartedness to it, but
tell you what,
wrong place, wrong time, man.
She absolutely missed it. And then she wanted to give me all the lectures, and all I could think of is, I just want to go home.
Yeah, that sounds poorly played, man.
Yeah. So I deal with her, we deal with everything, and we get to go home. Well, do you think that anybody's going to sleep that night, especially knowing that you've got to come in for an interview?
I couldn't.
Probably the most important interview that you could ever have.
Not you, not your family. Nobody's sleeping, man.
No. So we go in the next day. The 2 guys that were shooters and me, they interviewed everybody else the night before for all the witness statements and all that kind of stuff. So we go in and we give our interviews, and I think all of us felt like a weight had been kind of lifted. You could
get that out of there.
You want to get it all off your chest, and you don't want to forget
the detail,
right? There's so much that you want to say, you want to make known, So I think we definitely felt like some of the weight had been lifted after that.
Yeah. So for people that haven't maybe heard the show before or haven't heard about how this process works, you get sequestered as an officer if you're involved in one of these critical incidents. They take you to them, you're on your own, but you have an officer assigned to you. It's basically they're keeping an eye on you, but you cannot say a word about what happened. You can talk about anything and everything else, but you can't talk about the incident and until you're debriefed, right? So, or until you go through your actual, deposition debriefing or whatever it is. And what you're saying is now you've had to go from the field, from the scene to the station. In some cases, I know they take people to hotels or whatever, and they put them in rooms so they're not actually like in an interrogation room or whatever. And you mentioned we're investigating a homicide now, but making so that doesn't make the officer feel like a criminal, right? However, there are components of this where I understand they're basically have to take pictures of you. They have to take your guns, or your tools. They have to take pictures. You take sign-on pictures, like taking mug shots. They go through this whole process. Again, you're not saying a word. You're just being processed. Anyhow, and then what you're saying is now I didn't get to say anything, and I can't go home and talk to my wife about this because this would be a violation of the policy, and it also puts the investigation at risk. Right. So you have to wait to come back the next day, and you've had this, let's just say, not so subtle a clinician come in and kind of piss you off, right? And I get that, dude. I'd be pretty irritated about like, not the right time or place, whatever. So you come back in the next day and you've had all this built up. And I also hear what you're saying. I guess I didn't put this together. It's not just about getting it out there and talking about like all this energy is pent up and you're looking to get it out, but you also want to get it out in the right way.
Yeah.
And sometimes talking through the problem more than one time can be helpful for that, quite frankly. Like, oh, wait a minute, I just realized I was telling so-and-so this and I missed this detail. Now that I think about it and I'm thinking back about it, it actually happened this way. I forgot about this part, but you don't get that luxury. You have to wait, and then you sit down, the cameras go on, the tape recorder goes on, and you have to go through the whole process once.
And you're at the mercy of someone else's questioning. It's you don't just give a monologue, right? You're answering questions. And so all of these things in your memory, you want to make sure all those important details are, like you're saying, are put in, and they're put in the right way,
I guess I didn't, and all the stories that have been told, I never got to that, to where you could be very frustrated and which for me would make me very emotional, nearly angry that you're asking good questions, but you're forgetting to fucking ask this one, which is critical in this particular incident. And it's not just for me, it's for everybody, right? Potentially the suspect for that matter, or any other innocent bystander or whatever else. So you have to hope that they're doing a really good job. And I would imagine those people that are doing those types of things are not generally the most well-liked people maybe in the department. I mean, who's interviewing you?
No, I got to say, actually, we have 2 lead investigators that are very well trained, and they are spot on.
Oh, good. That's great to know. That's great to know. So it's not just like the movies where you get the dick who's in internal affairs who comes in, who hates cops and has got a grudge or an axe to grind or something like that.
So I want to say it was, we had our 2 investigators. There was 3 people from the district attorney's office and my attorney.
So it's a room full of people.
It's good. Yeah.
It's a room full of people.
Yep.
All right, so you get this stuff off your chest.
Yep.
Did they do a good job? Did you feel like you got all the things out there that needed to get out there?
Yep, 100%.
Then what?
Then I'll tell you that now the real stress starts. 110%. The stress after the fact blows away the stress that you dealt with during that incident, hands down. I'll start off with how the department treats us, right? They definitely treated us well. They definitely had our well-being in mind of thing, as far as how things were going. We had peer support people that were assigned to us to check in on us, right? But I didn't know when I came in for my interview. I still didn't know. Am I off work? Am I on admin leave? Or do you expect me to put on a uniform tomorrow?
So I have to come back to work tomorrow. Yeah.
And if I'm off, how long am I off? Nobody could tell me. I couldn't get an answer, right? And then that same therapist that was all pissed off at me for drinking an energy drink is supposed to be the one that if I have problems,
I'm supposed to call her.
I'm supposed to call her. It doesn't work, right?
Probably not doing that.
Probably not. No. And I got to tell you, she's a nice lady. I've met her many times. I've done a lot of critical incident debriefs with her. She has good intentions. Sometimes her bedside manner, not so great.
Look, man, I've met a lot of nice people, but they're not great officers. I've met a lot of nice doctors that are shit doctors. I've met a lot of nice coaches that aren't good coaches. Like, nice and effective, are irrespective of one another.
Yeah. So we get some answers, and then we get some time off, right? To try to let us.
Like then and there on that day before you leave the building, or does it take some time? How long are you left kind of hanging on this?
It took a day or 2 before I finally got a final answer.
A day or 2. So you're just like, I'll just wait for your call?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So I ended up getting the rest of that week off. So they gave me 3 days. And then I had my normal days off. So I had 6 days off.
Okay.
And then I was expected to be back at work.
Okay.
So this is really where it starts to get heavy, right? I mean, this is now where your family is getting involved.
They want to make sure you're okay.
Right. And I told my parents, I told, people that I've been in relationships with, my girlfriend at the time, we'd only been together maybe 2 months when this happened. But I tell them, when something happens, you will hear it from me. I will call you, and no news is good news. If it takes me a little while to call you, let you know I'm okay, I'll let you know. But now everybody's got questions. Now everybody wants to know what's going on, right? My partners have kids. Their kids are freaking out. Their wives are freaking out. the extended families want to know what happened, right? And if you have people that are kind of privy to the politics of going on, now they're freaking out. Well, what happens next?
Yeah. So let me ask you, like, what are they? Is it more of a curiosity of like, what was the actual incident? Or is it more of a fear of what's going to happen to you? Or is it a little bit of both?
It's both. They obviously want to know what happened.
Right.
What did my loved one just go through?
Mm-hmm.
But then it's an absolute fear. It's, well, did you do something wrong? Are you gonna end up in jail?
Got it.
Are you gonna end up on CNN?
That's the assumption, right?
Are we gonna have
cameras
out in front of our house? Mm-hmm. Are we gonna be harassed online? Are we gonna? And that's a very real thing for our families, and it's horrible that we have to now put them through that. So now they're freaking out about all of those details. They're also trying to deal with us, who are obviously now coming down from, these chemical dumps that we've dealt with, right? And I'll tell you, me personally, I had some pretty significant physiological reactions to that stress incident, right? This was cumulative stress for my whole career. And this was kind of one of those, little bit of a deal breaker on this one, was I had so much stress built up. I had been involved in another incident. We had another officer involved shooting 8 days before this one, where I had a little bit of a role. I wasn't part of the shooting or anything like that, but it was stressful. It was.
You're having to go through basically the same type of stuff.
This was kind of the point in time. Oh, and I think I neglected to mention that this shooting incident occurred the week of the Derek Chauvin trial verdict. So this was,
I did not know that.
Probably the worst week in history for us to have been in an officer-involved shooting with a black male suspect who did not survive.
So I'm going to go back to the family component. They're watching all of this stuff going down on the trial. I mean, this was nobody was talking about anything else but this at the time. So their fear is being exacerbated by all of this, and totally legit, by the way, totally legit.
Because they see Derek Chauvin on television and then they personalize it.
Then they see you.
Right. Are we going to go through the same thing?
Oh, man. So the physiological stuff in terms of kind of what your body's doing, like during this time, I mean, I can't even imagine. I mean, I've been through some stressful shit before, and I know how my body responds to it. One of those things is I don't sleep. Like, I get this huge adrenaline and cortisol bump, dump. It totally jacks up my circadian rhythm, if you will. Like, I'm not sleeping. I don't know if it's daytime or nighttime. Yep. I lose my appetite. My digestive system, like my GI tract, just does not know what to do from a stress perspective. It is very uncomfortable. It's like being sick.
It's real.
It is like
very
being
real.
sick. I can only imagine it's similar to, I have no idea, but it's similar to like trying to detox from one of these things people are taking out on the street in terms of our narcotics, that your body is just like trying to readjust and figure this shit out. Yep. And it's not comfortable at all.
No, and it's not anything that you have a lot of control over.
Yeah, that's the biggest right? challenge in it. Yeah,
we've all been through a lot of stressful stuff
because you know why you're feeling it, right? You just can't stop it.
Yeah, I mean, at first, not really. You just kind of think, oh, I don't feel well, but I'm going to tough it out and I'm going to push through. But then, once you identify it, then you realize, this is why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling because of this stress. Well, then the real question is, how do I fix this?
How do I deal with it? Yeah.
And, we've all been through stressful stuff. When I had started when I was 22, my body was a lot different than I am now.
Yep.
I'm 36 now.
Yep.
Those changes as you progress and you get a little bit older, man, I never had digestive problems in my early 20s. Are you kidding me? Right. And then, now, man, I was throwing up. I didn't eat well. Right. And I ended up coming down with shingles, which I guess that you can attribute to stress.
Yep.
So I had shingles across my chest, or on the backside.
Very painful. Yeah.
Super painful. And that was triggered by stress. Nothing I could control, but I had to deal with that. I took my heart wasn't feeling right. The stress, right? I feel like I drank way too many energy drinks. I was just pounding. So I took my blood pressure at home and it was like 194 over 122. And it's never been that high in my life. And that's sitting on the couch.
It's pretty high, man.
And so, like I said, my girlfriend and I had only been together a couple months, and she's seeing all this stuff and she's like, you need to go to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Your body is not you keep saying you're okay, because that's what I kept saying. I'm like, I'm fine. I'm stressed, but I'm fine. But my body's telling a different story. And so I ended up going to the doctor. I got put on a bunch of meds, try to get that blood pressure down, because that's like stroke risk, and try to get things kind of leveled back out. And the physiological stuff can last a good long time. And I talked to other guys that were a part of this and other guys that have been part of other critical incidents. They tell you the same thing, And I think it's really important that we get that out to people in the first responder community, that it's okay to have these symptoms and to feel this way.
To not feel okay.
It's okay to not feel okay. And what's really important is you just need to identify it, and let's start taking steps to feel better.
So aside from going to the doctor and I'm immediately kind of taking the life jacket, like, dude, we got to get this down, so take this.
Right.
For now, what does the rest of that process look like?
So I ended up, that therapist that pissed me off about my energy drink, I don't want to go see her.
That makes sense. So what are your alternatives? What are your choices?
Right. That's where I was at. And
asking the question, like, of the department or whatever, like, so this is not an option for me. What are my options?
No, I took it upon myself and did some research.
So you're advocating for yourself in this sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Cops don't trust people. They don't want to just talk to anybody. I'm not going to just hop on Google and say, therapist near me. Oh, they got a 4-star review. I'll check them out. Maybe they'll be good, right? No. So I end up through a friend getting in touch with a therapist who at the time was in San Ramon, who was a retired police officer, and in his retirement is now doing therapy, and he loves to specialize in first responders. And he came very highly recommended. And so I said, you know what, let's do it. My insurance didn't cover it. It was $155 a visit.
This is a thing. Yeah. Yeah. It's not like, I was just having this conversation with another guy the other day. It's 150 to about 200 to 250 in some cases bucks an hour.
Yep.
Right. So, and this is going to be cash out of pocket because you're not using the whoever your insurance provider is recommended or said you should use.
Right.
Which to you was not an option for you. And I'm going to say, based on that, just that reaction alone, as inappropriate as that may have sounded, and of course, I'm probably very biased to this, that person needs to probably be questioned as to what they're doing and how they're doing it. Because anyway, so you go outside the network, and this costs you money, right? It costs you money. And not everybody has, while police officers generally speaking, make a good wage, depending on where you're living, what your life situation is like, like, are you divorced? Are you paying, are you taking care of multiple families, those kind of things? What's going on? That's a lot of money.
Well, I mean,
this is not something you're going to do for 1 or 2 times and be fixed.
No.
Right. So this is a thing you need to make a commitment to, and it could be weeks, it could be months, it could be years.
Yep.
So,
it's over $600 a month. I mean, that's not, if you're on a fixed income, like a lot of people are, that's something that you have to make a decision about. And to me, it's worth it. Yeah. I would rather pay out of pocket and get what I feel is the best care for the best person to help me, rather than just go with who I find on Google.
Yeah, you're not bargaining for your health. And too many people are doing that. They're not trying to bargain their health away for the best deal,
right?
Or to check the box. All right. So an interesting part about this is somebody that specializes in first responders, so understands the traumas, has experienced the thing. Did you say they were an ex-officer as well? Yeah. So understands the things that you see and you do and you have to deal with every day on the street, when you go home, when you come back after critical incidents and things like that. And again, the point's been made many times on this podcast that the system of health care management, sick management, just in general that we're living in right now, does not account for this. It does not account for this. And I just had somebody reach out to me the other day after another podcast that I did on suicide prevention and awareness, specific to the military community, and that it's the same there, only worse. Yeah. Because they don't have any, once they're discharged, right, they're done. And trying to get help there is let's just say the things that you guys have to go through is ridiculous. But the point there being is he made this point and he basically said, hey, there's a massive gap in the understanding of what people need in terms of resources. And the rest of society, let's just say, or the general healthcare system needs to catch up to what the needs, the very specific needs are based on the very specific circumstances for these special populations.
Absolutely.
So trying to put a special population into Gen Pop is not going to be an effective means to an end. And that end being, first off, getting this person some help. Like there needs to be more resources available, like right now, not 3 or 4 weeks from now when we can get you an appointment, but right now. And then also understanding that don't put the fresh grad, right, who's just come out of, going back to you, putting the 22-year-old in front of the 36-year-old officer who's seen way more shit and dealt with way more stuff than this 22-year-old could have accumulated in their period of time. Don't put that person in front of this person because, again, going back to my original question, what business did you have as a 22-year-old giving, an old married couple marital advice on how to handle themselves? You don't. You're not there yet. You haven't. So who should be doing that? Again, it comes to the territory, but finding somebody that can help you and you can relate to. But you mentioned a huge word there, and that's trust. And trust that they can understand what you're going through, but also trust that what you tell them is dealt with in an appropriate kind of way. While most of these people are mandated reporters, if there was anything that came up in those meetings that maybe they thought you were going to hurt yourself or somebody else or whatever, they'd have to send that up the flagpole, up the chain. Also understand what is and what isn't a red flag, and what is almost normal, right? And what can be dealt with and has the tools in order to deal with it. I just want to make that point because it's come up several times this month as we've been sort of talking on this subject. And the fact that you were able to do that and self-advocate for yourself to go out and do it right away is not a thing that a lot of people do from what I've been hearing and what I've been told. They have to go through the system first of finding out all the bad shit, which just gets even more frustrating, erodes any trust that might be there anyway before they finally find their way in. So
it's just so sad to me too that it's in our first responder community, it's taboo still to talk about this stuff, First responders, all of them, dispatchers, firefighters, everybody got into this because they want to serve. They want to do this, right? They are very physically active people, right? A lot of cops that I work with are former athletes. And so I always tell people when we have these serious talks, hey, you've been injured before, right? You've torn a muscle, you've sprained a joint. You know the process to make that better, right? You got to ice it. You got to rest it. You got to get your strength back, your range of motion. You got to work your way back to healthy, back to normal. So why is it that you're completely understanding of a muscle tear or a sprained joint and you're okay with that, but you can't associate your mind to the muscle? You can't associate that some of these critical incidents kind of hurt your brain as a muscle a little bit, and you got to rehab it. You've got to let it rest. You've got to give it some time to get back to where we're at. And we're okay to talk about our physical injuries, but it's very taboo in first responders to talk about anything that's going on in your mind.
Yeah, this is what I've been told about that. Like the taboo comes in with, I think, what you said early on, which is like, yeah, I'll tough it out. I'm fine. Right. And that's just what's expected. Right. It's also part of the A-type personality to like, I'll just put this over here and I'll deal with it here. This is a box I need to check off, but now's not a good time. I have these other priorities. Right. That's part of it. The other part of it is having the conversation, knowing that it could get out to the other officers or people on your team, which could create some amount of concern or distrust or whatever. I've heard that as being they're scared that that could then ultimately lead them to have their badge and gun taken away or get them pulled off the truck behind a desk or whatever, and not be able to do the job that they love, that they signed up for and whatever. So there's all these confounding factors that totally sort of go into this.
Totally.
My question is like, how do we change that, dude? Like, how does that? How do we reverse that process?
We're so good at compartmentalizing it, and we're so good at toughing it out for all those years while our box gets full. And then it's kind of a freak out moment when that box starts to overflow. So we've got to do a better job of dealing with that stuff as it goes in time and not waiting for it to get so bad. I think we also need to change the stigma of this, that when you are actually having a hard time with something, it's okay to say I'm not okay and to get some help. This isn't a death sentence, and it's not the end of the world for your job. It's okay to say I'm just having a hard time. I need to get some help. You're not going to get fired from your job, hopefully, more than likely on the vast majority of this. But you need to do the right thing to take care of you as a person, you as the officer, the fireman, the dispatcher. You can't help others if you're significantly broken. And look at that person that you are. I mean, look in the mirror and look at what your family is and your friends are seeing in you. Are you giving your best to them every day? Or are you just toughing it out well enough to get by?
Getting by is not the answer.
That ain't no way to live.
Right.
If you're just getting by every day and you're toughing it out, are we talking that you've been toughing it out for years and you're having all of these problems, these demons in the closet that you're not dealing with? Well, what kind of a father are you being, or mother? Mm-hmm. And how much better of a person would you be if you could address that you're having those problems and start working on it? The guy that I went to and saw for therapy, he used to say, we're not going to fix this overnight. Rome wasn't built overnight, right? But if we can identify some of the problems that you're having, we can work on some coping mechanisms to help you start feeling better. If in a week, 2 weeks, you feel 10% better, that's great. That's
success.
That's a success, because from there, your happiness is going up, your confidence is going up, and then we're going to keep working for the next 10% and the next 10%. It's not you're all better overnight, but it's helping you to feel better in every way, a little bit at a time, because this is a marathon of a job. Mm-hmm. I'm halfway through my career, and I've already had all these problems that, this has really forced me in the last year to take some steps to identify it, to try to better myself, to not be this person that I was and just hiding everything and not talking about it. I'm still not great at it by any means. I still have my own list of issues, but I'm learning to deal with it. And it was really eye-opening for me at how well it has helped me in my life. And I want other people that are feeling the way that I used to feel to know that there's hope there, that 10% every couple of weeks to feel just a little bit better. Enjoy life more with your family, maybe not have such disdain for your job, or maybe realize that this job, this career that you have doesn't have to be your entire identity. Mm-hmm. That they're going to move on when you're not here anymore.
We hear that. Right? Yeah, we hear that a lot on this end, man. That's your identity is completely tied up in your gun and your badge, but you are a person.
Right. At the end of the day. And a lot of us lose that identity. Mm. And it's a sad thing, but we're so committed to what we're doing and we love it and we want to help people. But you can't help people if you're broken at the same time. So
no, you can't. You can't pour from an empty cup, as they say. I wonder, could you share, for people that are like, look, I get it. Like what Chris is saying is really kind of ringing home for me right now. And I know I need to be doing stuff, but I'm just not quite sure. Wonder if there's any, was there been a tool or a practice or, a mantra or whatever that has really helped you, that you really can kind of hang your hat on since really seeking this help, that was very impactful, that for you were like, dude, why wasn't I doing this before? This is not this isn't rocket science. I could have done this. If I just maybe thought about it a little bit. And here's the kind of the analogy I draw, in working with the canine trainer, we show up to some of these lessons, or that he would show up to us, and he would go through some stuff, walk through some stuff, and I'd be I'm really frustrated that I can't do a better job communicating with the dog. This would be me talking. I can't communicate with the dog to get her to do this, or, I want to know better. And he go, oh, no problem. We'll just do this right over here. And I look at it and I go, the fuck didn't I think of that? That is the simplest thing. It just makes perfect sense. I mean, I'm a smart person. I'm not an idiot. I'm not not a genius, but I could have totally done that. And all the frustration I felt in the last week from the last lesson or whatever was just this little nuanced little thing that I could have completely applied all on my own. And I think people need that. I needed that to then go, look, this isn't that tough. It really isn't. I'm making this tougher than it needs to be. Some of this stuff is so obvious. It almost I almost feel like an idiot at the end of the day going, how come I didn't figure that out? Anything like that in this process for you?
Totally. I think I really struggled with kind of looking in, the inner perspective of identifying what I'm feeling and trying to figure out why I'm feeling that way. And I would fail myself, man. When I was a single guy, before I met my girlfriend, I would have my days off and I would be so burnt out of dealing with people. And I essentially close all the blinds and I would just want to stay home.
Just isolate.
Yeah. And that just started to become normal to me. And then when I met my girlfriend, she's not about that. She likes to, be a social butterfly and wants to go out and do things. And then in the process of her kind of nicely nudging me to go out and interact with people, I realized, man, if I would have just forced myself to go out of the house a little bit more and not think that everyone around me is bad and not think that, being in the situations, I'm not going to be in fight or flight situations. I can be with groups of friends and groups of people that'll make me feel a little bit better. If I would have done a little bit more of that, I think I would have been able to clear some of the fog out of my mind.
Yeah, purge the valve a little bit.
Yeah, and that was always my big issue was I never identified what was wrong. I knew something was wrong, but I could never put my thumb on it. And that therapy really helped me to figure out, identify what those issues were. Because then once you have those specific things identified, then you can learn how to cope and deal, right? And you learn that the next time that you're sitting on the couch with all the blinds closed and you just don't want to be around people, well, why am I feeling like this today? Did something happen this week that I don't feel good about? Maybe I need to go for a walk. Maybe,
That's the biggest piece right there. So I've been through a little bit of a process of my own. And I've shared this before. I've seen several therapists in my life for different things, different times, different situations that have come up. I think that are very normal, right?
Yeah.
Particularly at this point. And I didn't think at the time they were unnormal either. But going back to what you were saying there, in the therapist helping you to identify for yourself. So I think one of the things to put on the side for people is like, you're not going to somebody who's better than you that's going to fix you. You're going, honestly, like my experience was that I would go, and not all of it was positive, by the way. Like I saw some therapists that I thought were very unhelpful and, some that were very helpful at different times and depending on the things. But the point was the ones that were most helpful were the ones that just helped me identify like, holy shit, Scott, you totally ignored that. Like, or that red flag has been there forever and you didn't even see it. Like you didn't see the forest for the trees. And for me, it wasn't like I feel stupid, like going back to the, training the dog analogy. It was more like, fuck, like that's so easy to do, like to peel back the layers of the onion to understand like why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. Like I'm pissed. I'm not really pissed. There's something else there. Like anger is the first thing that surfaces for me. I think it does this for a lot of males, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's really easy. We're really good at being angry at shit and then taking our emotions to that level and kind of keeping it at level anger or whatever that is. But if you peel back the layers of the onion to find out why you're angry, there's generally some other stuff down there. You just need to figure out how to do it on your own. And that's what therapy is about. It's about going and figuring out the tools that help you work. So getting with the right person is a big part of that. But so simple, man. Like who would think?
Yeah.
Like I just need to go out and talk to people more. Like I gotta be honest, like I've isolated at times in the last year with all the stuff that we've, that's been going on because I don't like getting into the conversations, about the politics and whatever else. Who's going to be at the party? Now, I don't want to go because I don't want to deal with that. But at the same time, like that's part of it too. Like what social groups are you a part of? What changes do you need to make? Right. Those things. And, hanging around with all cops all the time probably isn't healthy all the time. And hanging around with people that are engaging in other behaviors maybe not be a good thing, but understanding how to cope and trying little things and then examining, was that helpful? And then why? That's what therapy was for me.
It's huge.
Yeah. So I think the next question I'd have is like, this is like just over a year ago or a year and a half ago.
About a year and a half ago.
Yeah. And you just effectively, it took over a year to ultimately get cleared of any wrongdoing as an officer. Like, hey, you checked out. Basically what I've heard it stated as, good buddy Craig, this is like, namaste, you did okay. Like, that it goes in the file and you move on. Dude, how do you move on from something like that?
Well, I think once you hit all of those check boxes that you wanted to get through, for me at least, it has been kind of a way to look back and learn from it and see, what went well, what didn't go well. And, when you're going through all that, the last thing you want is to ever have to do that ever again. Right. I don't ever want to have to go through, my stomach feeling bad and the shingles and the stress that lasted for over a year. I don't ever want to have to deal with that again. Right. But now I'm kind of to the point where I dealt with it. I made it through. I learned a lot of good coping mechanisms. This therapy has helped me a lot. It's brought my relationship closer with my girlfriend. And, I feel like I'm way more prepared now to deal with something like that than I ever was beforehand. So, it is a long process that over a year wait to get cleared from the district attorney to say that, you guys aren't going to be in any trouble for this. And, the lawsuits haven't dropped and all these things that you think are going to be terrible that are eventually going to come hit you when they haven't happened, you kind of breathe a little bit and you start to feel a little bit better. The one negative thing that I always hoped and prayed wouldn't happen happened, and it ended up being a cool thing. I never wanted to be on the news for this, right? We were on the local news for a little blip and that was it. But we ended up less than a week after this incident, we were on Hannity on Fox News one night.
No shit.
Yeah. And it ended up being a really positive article or a program that he put on. And I was like, man, okay, this...
because that could go either way.
One of my worst nightmares was this hitting big news, and it did, but it wasn't so bad. And we made it through. So, I try to take the good, what I've learned from it, the positive parts, and I try to let go of the negative and
focus on the positive.
Yeah.
I wonder how you do that. Like, how do you communicate this message? And I think this is probably like kind of as we're wrapping up here. How do you communicate this message back to the 22-year-old that you were, 13 years ago or whatever, so that they come up different than you did, and maybe they're not in that same situation? Because here's the thing you just mentioned. I mean, you're halfway through. The likelihood of something like this happening again is very high. It's very high, particularly on the streets that you work and live on, right? Like, it's very high. So you're equipped in a much different way at a much different level to deal with it in the future. How do we communicate? I think it needs to communicate two ways. Because you mentioned leadership as being a huge missing piece. We could do an entire podcast on that sometime about, kind of how to be a good leader and where the missing pieces are. And a lot of it has to do with longevity. And you mentioned that as well. It's like people just aren't around very long to ever be held accountable to or see the fruits of, fruits of their labor, held accountable to the poor decision-making that they made, and or when they're making, as a result, as they're making these decisions, they don't have to think about the consequences. But it still needs to be communicated up.
Yeah.
And change needs to happen there. And maybe you don't have the influence on that right now. Maybe you don't. You can only hope that over time and the message gets there, and then maybe some point 10 years down the road, you're in that leadership position and you can help to literally change policy. But it also needs to happen on the down. It needs to go downstream. If it's not happening from leadership, then or those that have been, the wand or the sword has been, you are the leader and you make this policy and you make this decision and what you say goes. That doesn't mean you can't be a leader in the space.
Right.
We've talked about this on the show too. This guy, Blake Kreider, he's an executive production. He's like, start being a leader now. You don't have to be told you're a leader. You don't have to be given a rank. You don't have to be given a title to start leading now. So how can guys like in your position do that? What are you doing now to kind of push it down to the younger generation to help them understand, make them feel okay with this? At the same time, maybe by not pissing people off above you, or is that even possible?
Oh, well, those that know me know that that's probably not possible.
We'll talk about it.
I'm not very good on the filter side of things, but no. So I'll say that going through these critical incidents and the one thing that I've really learned from this one is, we're all control freaks, right? We're type A people. And when things are not within our control, that's where we start to have these irrational fears and we start to have things kind of go haywire. So I've learned to identify what do I have control over and where can I make a positive influence, like what we're talking about. And so I think we all like to mentor those that are coming up behind us. Everybody wants to make it better for the next generation, but you have to know that in this line of work, what I've been through is very common and those that come behind me are going to experience the same. And so I want to give them every tool that I've learned to help deal with it and prepare them for the day that it comes. And that's where I have a little bit of control. So like I got this book, it's called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. I got this when I got hired as a cop. And we had the guy that wrote this book, Kevin Gilmartin, came out and gave a presentation. Right? Okay. And it's phenomenal. This talks about everything from the start of your career all the way through. I mean, you could read this book, you know, when you get hired, you could read it at 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and you're always going to take something away. Okay. It's always going to give you something new to think about, to realize, to acknowledge where I'm at. So I try to prepare my guys that are below me, my recruits, the guys that I work with in an area. And I actually went on Amazon. I bought a bunch of copies of these books. And I've identified some guys that I've seen go through some hard times. And we've had one-on-one conversations. And I don't want to get into those because I don't want anybody to ever figure that out. But I've given them copies of this book. And I know that some of the younger guys that have kids and wives, I said, hey, you had that beautiful family before you got into this job. Don't lose sight of that. Right. Don't miss the boat, because this book can help you. And this book will help your wife understand why you are the way you are.
So that's a whole nother part of it, right? Like, it's not just for the officer. It's for anybody that might know. It's for mom. It's for dad. It's for the spouse, the partner, or whatever, the brother, the sister, who may even be on the other side of things. You may not agree politically on anything. That's not what this book is. Nope. This is strictly how to deal with the things that come up, or identify the things, or at least just let's acknowledge and be aware of the stuff that's out there.
I mean, we were just talking about isolating. Dr. Gilmartin calls it the magic chair, that you go, on your work days, your hypervigilance is up, your chemical dumps are up high, your adrenaline, everything. And then when you go to your days off, you don't go back to a baseline of normal happy. You're below that. Your body's trying to recover from that. And so when you are so mentally exhausted, physically, emotionally, what do you want to do? You want to sit in your magic chair, and you want to close the blinds, and you want to watch TV, and you want to veg out, and you want to try to let yourself recover. We've all been there.
No,
it's
absolutely.
not the healthiest thing, right?
No.
And so, you probably aren't going to recognize it for a long time, because I didn't recognize it for a long time. But what if just one wife would read this book and be able to identify, that's why my husband's doing that.
Right.
And with that, she can affect some change, and she can help get him up and going and get the family back,
or at least have a conversation about it.
Right. And there's so many examples like that in this book that help you identify what's going on. And so I really, when I figured out that the only thing that I have control over is the influence that I can maybe give to these younger guys, that's really where I want to pour my heart and soul into it. I can't change the administration. I can't change the lack of leadership. I can't change the fact that we are stuck in this time warp, that there's no other options for first responders. Then there's nothing new, really, that hasn't been there since the 90s.
Status quo, right?
Right. We have the same therapy option as we had in the 90s.
Yeah, we talked about this, something very wrong with that.
We don't have the ability to say, hey, when our guys come to us and they say they're burnt out, is there something else we can do for them? Can we just let them get a week off the street of dealing with all these people and let them have a little bit of a mental health break? Let's do some training. Let's do, let's pull them away from taking calls for service and being tied to a radio and being stressed out of your mind, and give them a week for some new updated training. What's the newest, latest, and greatest? What are you interested in? Let's go do it.
Yeah, something like that. So that's the thing about the training we were talking about earlier, is like, and you mentioned you're training our bodies and training our minds. And there's the emotional piece, I think, of getting in touch with, without the risk of maybe sounding too corny for people that might be on the edge here anyway, checking in with your soul and what's really going on in there before you're forced to. Right. And there could be some aid being given with regard to this stuff. So yes, getting out on the range, maybe trying the new gear, the new equipment, the latest and greatest there. Maybe it's the negotiation techniques and learning how to talk to people, or training your mind to understand what is it you might be going through, and not make it miserable for them.
Yeah.
Make it productive, and because I think there's been a lot of training in the last year, and it hasn't necessarily been any of that stuff.
Right.
And I've been, and you could probably go on for days and days about how many hours you spent in a classroom, or you had to sit in a room. watching a video, listening to somebody tell you about how you should be dealing with things differently on the street when they have no earthly idea what it is that you're actually doing out there on a regular basis. This goes back to my whole kind of diatribe earlier, and how frustrating that is, and how millions and millions of dollars have been spent on that stuff, and it just goes in one ear and right out the other. But it doesn't just do that, because on the trip through, it also creates anger, it creates resentment, it creates a distrust, and it leads to a bad mental space to be in. Yeah. So, sometimes just a book, and making somebody take some time to go, this is your assignment. Like, take 2 days, read this book. There's a quiz on it when you're done, kind of thing. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know, man. Yeah, I mean,
there's got to be a middle ground between either you're good and you're fully functioning, you're 100% on the street, or you're off. The answer is not to send people home, because what's going to happen? Your guys are already mentally messed up.
They're going to the magic chair.
They're going to the magic chair.
Yeah,
it's not helpful. People that are in these jobs want to work, but maybe they need a break from the status quo to let their mind relax. They need to rehab their mind a little bit.
I think there's such an opportunity there. I mean, there's such an opportunity within the Police Officers Association, within the First Responder, Association, to come together to close the gap a little bit and stop. Maybe don't rely on I don't like this term. Don't rely on the civilian system of way of doing things, or the status quo of doing things, and stop blaming it. For that matter, like it's not the right answer, so we need to come up with one. And on the flip side of that, those that are having issues or are really negative about, look, man, I've been through that system and it's no good. It just makes things worse. Maybe be a little bit more loud. Maybe be a little bit more proactive and be involved in some of these other alternative things. And I think, just talking about it starts the process. We didn't solve world hunger here. We didn't solve the problem, but if it gets through and it helps more people maybe talk about it, and recognize that I can't control these things, but I can control this. And I can help this officer right now. I can help this spouse of this officer right now, or I can help my spouse maybe understand this differently. Then I guess that's where it starts. I guess that's where it starts. But but blaming, like what's going on upstream, is probably not going to be real healthy or helpful. At the same time, it doesn't mean you can't have conversations, like meaningful ones. Sure. But bitching about it doesn't help any of this, right? Trying to be proactive about it and being honest about it, I think, is different than bitching. But you got to go downstream. You got to help those people that need help, so that when the next 22-year-old officer, 23-year-old officer jumps on, they're getting some tools and they're getting some skills from somebody they trust, respect, know, who's been there. Doesn't have to have all the answers, but is now giving them some tools to peel back layers of the onion, acknowledge, recognize the stuff that's going on out there, so that they can then take it home as well, or to their friends, to their relationships, or whatever else. And we're maybe in a little bit different place than we are now, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now.
Right.
Look, Chris, I really appreciate you coming in and sharing your story today and your message. This has been a really recent thing for you, and while I was familiar with the O.I.S that you did mention, I didn't have all the details. That's a pretty harrowing story, man, and you handled yourself well. I got to be honest, you handled it really well. Like, how I would have expected a 13-year veteran on the street to handle that conversation. I can imagine going home from here and revisiting or reliving or rethinking about it is a very, very tough thing to do. So I appreciate you coming today and handling it the way you did here. And I hope it helps people. I think it will. It helped me understand things a little bit different, to be able to have a little bit of a different conversation. And I wish you the best of luck as you move forward. Is there anything that I can do to help you, your team, the community at all? If there is, just say it, man.
No, I like I talked about having some control over something, right? And you having me on to talk about these things, to share my experience. If in any way that one word or one sentence of what we talked about today causes a little bit of change in someone's life for the better, it's all worth it. And that's where we start.
All right, well, I appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Got it.